Space, the final frontier. These are the podcasts of the Starfleet Night Shift, our continuing mission to discuss strange new worlds. TM. To review Star Trek in all its iterations, to boldly talk about Trek we've all seen before.
Before.
Oh, guys, it is good to be back. It has been so long. I love this. Welcome, everyone, to the Night Shift. It is I, Captain Merrick, Chief Jennifer, and Science Officer Azure. Joining me as usual, we are back from our long hiatus. We had a lot of stuff going on over the holidays, and we're just sort of ramping back up into this. Very excited to be back, and there are very exciting things happening. So if you're watching this later, we're currently at the stage in Star Trek Picard Season 3, where we just finished Episode 3 as of today. So the last time that we were talking, we all discussed sort of the anticipation of this upcoming season, our hopes, our fears, everything that we sort of expected or maybe were dreading. And now we have at least gotten a healthy taste of this, which we will be discussing tonight. We will be bringing back the podcast in its weekly format starting now. So as we watch additional episodes, we'll be doing follow-ups on them as we go. But right now we've got 3 episodes to chew through. I don't even know where to start, man. I would love to. I want to go around the room, talk about what people thought going into this. Were you, for those who haven't had this discussion with us in a while, where were you heading out of season 2 and into season 3? Were you looking forward to this? What were you concerned about? What were you hoping for? And then we'll go back around and sort of touch bases about how things have been unfolding. So let's start with you, Azure. Were you like everyone else? Were you, I don't know, jaded, angry, disheartened, cautiously optimistic? How did you feel about it?
That's a lot of options. So the funny thing is, I kind of wish I'd gone back and watched our podcast where we talked about this, because I'm having trouble objectively remembering what I was saying back then because of the influence season 3 has had on me thus far. I want to say, and it'll be hilarious when I'm completely wrong, that I was, even before the season 3 trailer, which I think we were all extraordinarily pumped about, even before that, I was cautiously optimistic with the characters that they had revealed were coming back. Especially because upon rewatching Picard season 2, still agree with your take that it would have made a great 2-part episode with episodes 1 and 10.
Indeed.
But like, those 2 episodes were so good, and I loved the interactions between Picard and Q, that I had more faith than I certainly did after season 1. So I want to say I was cautiously optimistic, but I really genuinely don't remember what I was saying at the time.
Yeah. I want to say that that's probably what I remember of you too. I think that you were off the bat the most optimistic, right? I think
that's
there
how
were
I remember it too.
Yeah, there were some unveilings, I think, like little tidbits of information that we were sort of coming across in the news media cycle as things were being discussed about the intentions for season 3, the characters coming back, the eventual sort of teaser that showed, some big strokes about the season, at least like some big hooks to get previous fans in, things like Moriarty, things like lore, some and even in the inclusion of Worf, like there's definitely some things we saw from the trailer that got people a little bit excited. Even the concept itself of the torch being handed off for a next generation. A lot of these things were sort of unveiled as we went through that process between season 2 and season 3. That probably got, at least me, I'll speak just for myself, like a little bit more optimistic as that progressed. But leaving season 2, right at the very end of season 2, I was not feeling very hopeful about it. And before I go into any more detail, I'll check with you, Chief Jennifer. How did you feel? Did you like season 1, season 2? When you left season 2, were you looking forward to season 3?
I was curious, but I didn't really know what to expect. Like I wasn't really expecting anything hugely Star Trek feeling. Like I was generally curious to see where they were going to go with the storylines and the plot lines that they had started, but I wasn't excited. Let's put it that way. When I did see the trailer, I was very excited when I found out that they were bringing back Moriarty. I think that's what sort of got me pumped to begin with. So that was a big part of it going into season 3. And so far, I think, the idea of bringing back Beverly and the son, I think that obviously is like a huge deal and something that I think everybody's kind of excited about just because those are such like beloved characters.
Well, now I feel like we're skipping ahead a little bit, and you're absolutely right. There are some things that happened between episode 1 and episode 3 that had another huge leap in terms of investment or excitement from previous fans. So let's skip ahead to episode 1. By the time you guys had finished episode 1, did that confirm any of your feelings? Did you feel better about the show or worse about the show? Maybe the same? Asher?
When I started my rewatches that Merrick and I both said we were going to do, like I rewatched episodes 1 and 2 in the last couple days, I was making notes for myself. And I didn't actually make notes during the episode 2 because I was watching it on my phone while laying in bed. But I think, especially, I didn't hear Chief Jennifer say as much during the watch party, but based on your comments, Merrick, I certainly think out of the two of us, I came out of it feeling much more positive or excited than you did initially. Don't know if that remains true or not. But
in the first episode?
Yeah.
Yes.
And we can go into reasons why, but I'll let you guys both give your responses first. But I left it feeling not completely reassured. Like I was still, at best, cautiously optimistic. But I think I was much more optimistic having seen just the first episode.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Jennifer?
It was both. I kind of was in a push-pull situation. I was excited about what was there. I liked the first episode, like 90% of it. I still was just a little worried because it was still kind of showing Starfleet is like somebody to avoid. Like they were still kind of, I was worried that they were going to go back down that train. And that's just wasn't a plot that I really wanted to continue from the first 2 seasons. But from what I can tell, that's not really that's not really what the plot is turning into. So I'm really happy about that.
I love that you brought that up because that at least puts a little bit more context into how we felt in the first 2 seasons, right? One of the real issues I have with Star Trek Picard is exactly what you just touched on. I think that Starfleet maybe being corrupt, being bad, making incorrect choices, not a humanitarian organization as we know it to be, like turning its back on refugees, all these things that we sort of saw in the first 2 seasons. I think that really touches on some of the broader themes that have changed dramatically in the Star Trek universe as a whole. And this is an interesting tie-in, but one of my favorite discussions we had at one point was like, how do you get someone else into Star Trek, right? Like somebody who's not a pre-existing Star Trek fan, like how do you get them to do it? Because it's such a broad TV show. It's like asking someone how you get someone into Doctor Who, which has been around for a billion years. And so if you want to say from the beginning, that's almost unrealistic, right? Because you have a really hard time bringing someone back to the beginning of Doctor Who or the original series if they don't have an already significant attachment to the show, to the characters, to the universe. Then going back and starting at something so old and dated is really tough, right? That's a hard sell for a modern audience member just coming into the franchise at the time. But the reason why this is a weird tie-in is because TNG in particular. The reason why I bring this up is because DS9 is my favorite show. As you guys know, it's my absolute favorite Star Trek. It's my favorite show in general. But I honestly feel like, DS9 and Voyager and even Enterprise, every other Star Trek that has happened since TNG only gets to be fully enjoyed, in my opinion, if you have the baseline of the Next Generation. TNG sets the stage for what the Federation, what Starfleet, what the 24th century is like, what it is supposed to be. We get the ideal, right? That's what TNG is about. That draws the ideal, and then we break from it. Why is DS9 so significant? Is it because that they're on the edge of space and there's this great looming threat and war with humanity? Of course not. That's every sci-fi ever known to man ever. What makes it great, what makes it more significant is where we came from. We set up what the Federation is supposed to be, what Starfleet is supposed to be, and how humanity is supposed to be, how we've evolved. And then you end up you pose the question, okay, all right, we had 7 seasons of The Next Generation. We saw the idealism, exploring the galaxy, right? The Prime Directive, all of these altruistic embodiments of human morality, evolved human morality. And then we pose the question, okay, great, we accept that. But what if you're on the edge of space? What if you're not in the flagship of the Federation? What if you're not surrounded by Federation aligned planets? What if you're in a hostile environment? What if you have limited resources? What if you don't get the final say in the politics of the region? What if you're in war? What if you take that Starfleet thing? You have to understand where they came from to understand the significance of posing those deep questions. Well, go ahead.
Oh, it reminds me of one of my favorite lines from, I think it's season 3 of DS9, maybe season 2 even. Sisko himself says, you know what the problem is? The problem is Earth.
Earth, yes.
They live in a paradise, and it's easy to be a saint in paradise.
Oh, God. I got goosebumps, man. Just you saying that. I love that show so much. I love that line. Because you know what is so great about that show? It's not just that that it's posing those questions. It's that they know they are. They know what they're doing. All of that is intentional. It wasn't like an FU to Star Trek or to what has happened before. They did something beautiful with the context of that story, and they knew what they were doing. They knew that they were in juxtaposition of TNG and sandwiched between that and Voyager, which Voyager directly tries to answer that question in a different way, right? We're alone in the Delta Quadrant, but we're still going to be Starfleet officers, right? I mean, they really go to all lengths to basically try to address that. But Deep Space Nine was really aware of what they were doing when they were doing that stuff. And so part of what hurts me, and this is the weird tie, and this is how it gets all the way back with Star Trek Picard, is that they were the embodiment of what things were supposed to be. Now, we were forced to break rules, to enter gray areas. We were forced to do that in Starfleet, right? By outside forces. This is how we experienced Star Trek in the first place. Through Next Generation, we have evolved past, narrow-mindedness, past bigotry, past selfishness, past, all sorts of negative human elements that we attribute to modern humans today. We're supposed to be beyond that, but we get to explore the morality tales, which is what Star Trek really is, through the lens of approaching those same problems in other species, in other planets. And then we, with our evolved sensibilities, try our very best to navigate those treacherous seas with our evolved sense of right and wrong. And so that we still get to explore those stories, but we're above that with those same characters now, with Captain Picard, right? The paragon, the pinnacle of ethical, dealings with alien races, is now heading up a show that has dragged things down a lot in that way. Humans are a mess. Most humans we see prejudice. Most humans we see bigoted. Most humans we see mental illness, drug addiction, violence, corruption, right? Starfleet itself, corrupted. Picard leaves the Federation because it made a humanitarian choice that he disagreed with. And they're portrayed quite villainously. This is what hurts me so much, because that's really what Star Trek, in my opinion, is about in the first place. It's what sets it apart from every other sci-fi out there. And TNG is the utter tentpole for that cause, right? And it's that show, it's those characters that are sort of keeping up this negativity about humans and about Star Trek. I mean, there's more smoking in the first season of and drug use in the first season of Star Trek Picard than in all of Star Trek to date since then, including the one from the 60s. So
well, I have reflected on this a lot, especially now seeing, and we're going to come back to this, I assure you, because it's part of the parts that I've wanted to defend about Shaw since the beginning. But so we'll come back to that aspect. But if you look back at season 1 of Picard, which I admittedly have not rewatched in a little while, the reasons that they didn't rescue the Romulans wasn't prejudice or anything. It was because of the tragedy and destruction that Starfleet had just gone through, and they claimed we don't have the resources to mount this type of evacuation right now.
Right.
And Picard is the one who reasonably, I think, in the moment, gets upset, thinks that this is a betrayal of everything Starfleet has stood for, or the Federation has stood for about humanitarian efforts, and resigns. But then he kind of goes off the rails in repeatedly calling them out and like being an enemy, or an opposing force to Starfleet. And they don't like that, which is, I think, completely reasonable. And I agree. The parts of the series that you don't like are the fact that now, for some reason, rather than focusing on good and bad, the entire first season is basically, let's explore the darkest parts of like these edges of spaces where the Federation isn't reaching anymore and focus on that. And I agree. That's unappealing to people like you and I who love the things we love about TNG and DS9 and Voyager. But I think to claim that the representation of the Federation was bad is not the whole picture. It's the parts of the universe they chose to explore were bad. But I think, other than, the couple of betrayals that were like the Badmirals, as someone in our Discord once put it.
Badmirals, I love that.
In Picard, like the overall Starfleet structure, I don't think was shown as evil or bad. It was just something Picard wouldn't support anymore. Like he wouldn't come back to them even after like refugee efforts had, well, not really been made because they weren't. But
yeah, I think they just weren't made. Yeah.
I don't know. I basically kind of want to say that I think the lens through which we see the Federation makes it seem bad. And I think that's part of my key defense of Shaw, is that it's not necessarily the Federation's bad. We're just seeing it through Picard's kind of now jaded view.
That is a really good and interesting point. Now, it fits into my perspective in two different and interesting ways, because I love the semantical nature of that, because that sort of delineation between how it is being, how we are receiving that information is actually quite fascinating, right? It's we're receiving it because of the perspectives that we're seeing, and that those perspectives are from characters who might feel that way about the Federation, despite the fact that they're human, which is also, not out of the realm of possibilities, right? We watched I just finished touting how much I love Deep Space Nine, and we have the entirety of the Maquis, who really spend a lot of the show ragging on the Federation, right? That's not its own unique thing. But the other side of that is that all of these characters and the perspective in which it was chosen to be conveyed was still done by the writers, which is my chief complaint, that they have decided to give us that portrayal of the Federation. And it's my hope, and this actually ties into some thoughts that I was having with this most recent episode, that when we get to the end of this series, that this will have come a big full circle, and that, Azure, you're correct, and that we start to see different perspectives on this. I think this is an evolving thing, at least if they end up getting the credit I'm trying to give them now. I think that we will get to see more perspectives than that. But it really isn't just Picard. That's part of the problem, because I like you, when I agreed with you, I was like, yes, it's from the characters that we're seeing this through, because it's actually a bunch that are this way. Raffi is another one, hates the Federation, is the smoking drug addict, this whole thing. Even, and I'm going to feel really bad for forgetting his name. He was the best actor in the whole of the first two seasons, the guy who played the many parts, Captain Ramos, right? Was it Ramos?
I think it's Ramos. That sounds right.
Same thing with him. He didn't same negative perspective on the Federation. We end up coming through even now with everyone has left. So every single person that we've talked to from TNG has left Starfleet and has some sort of spunky thing to say about it, except for Riker. who seems to be the one that sort of stuck around. But we do keep, and even in the beginning of this season, it was like, don't trust Starfleet. Now again, we saw today actually that there was more nuance to that.
Yeah, it wasn't,
so I'm hoping
it wasn't like Starfleet's bad. It was just nothing has gone right.
Nothing has gone right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
I do want to jump in with one thing. I do think I agree with you, especially when season 1 and frankly season 2 were the only seasons out. It was completely reasonable to have that view and think, why are they choosing to show us this from only this perspective? And I think that will remain frustrating, although I do, like you, kind of hope that it comes full circle. But a portion of that is that Picard doesn't have allies in Starfleet anymore, or probably in the Federation, but not in Starfleet, certainly, and that shows in season 1. And so he has to reach out to these people who are also alienated for one reason or another. And again,
sort of fringe,
from a writing perspective, it kind of sucks because it makes the whole first season this kind of like huge downer about this organization that we spent 20 years learning to love.
20?
More than 20, but like 20 years of like active shows through TNG, DS9, Voyager.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that is a really good point. And the one that I want to bring up, so like I want to add on to that, because the other one that I keep forgetting to bring up when I'm talking about this is 7 of freaking 9, who is another person, probably the number one person who comes in with this like, I hate the Federation as a whole. I'm on the edge and everything about society sucks and I am this thing. And then we see her walk in the door as Commander Annika Hansen, right? In charge of a first officer of an actual Starfleet vessel. She ends up going back to Starfleet, which was, by the way, a moment of like real joy for me. I thought maybe that was like a turning point there. And then we see all the negativity with Shaw, but I was immediately then proven wrong again, because Shaw, clearly an evolving character, clearly the dynamic here on this ship is evolving. And I'm not willing to, I'm much more willing to acknowledge that this could be a temporary thing, or at least have my perspective or the perspective of the Federation in a more positive light be shared in this show with maybe the other perspective on this. And I actually think, and I don't want to bog us down with this because we had a big discussion in this in one of the previous podcasts, but I actually think it's really indicative of the time frame, the current social political problems of today, and the way in which Star Trek interacts with current social society, that has it doing what it's doing. Because, and again, it's so easy to get really lost in a tangent here, but like, the infrastructure, right? The system must be corrupt. Whatever is in charge is really bad and should be sort of undermined. And that is something that we're seeing a lot and can really relate to in modern society, to be sure. I think that it's a weird fit into Star Trek. So without getting too deep into that, I agree with you, Azure. I actually think that my stance on this has changed more than most, because I definitely started really hard-lined on one side. It was very much against Picard, the show. I thought it was really negative. I was watching. You ever heard the term hate watching something?
Yes.
Like people hate watch it. I was absolutely hate watching this show, and it was something that I knew as like the diehard Trekkie that I am. I had to see it, right? I have to know everything that has happened in the world of Star Trek, but I was watching it through gritted teeth. I mean, right? That was really the experience.
My dad didn't use that phrase because I doubt he's ever heard it, but that's definitely was his experience with Picard season 1 as well.
Interesting. What is your dad's experience in Star Trek? Is he a big fan like you? Did he get you into it?
He and the rest of that side of my family are the reason I like Star Trek. Like, I grew up watching TNG, well, as it live aired, but also reruns, like after dinner each night. Not each night, but like most nights. So my dad, I mean, I know he watched the original series. I think he is not the biggest fan of it, although he loved the movies when they came out. So I think he's watched everything. Like, he watched Discovery, was not a huge fan of that. Watched Picard, didn't like season 1. He was very wary about Strange New Worlds because he hadn't enjoyed Discovery or Picard. And I told him, I was like, me and some friends are watching it. We love
Yeah.
it. You need to give it a try because you liked like the classic era of Trek, and he did, and he loves it now.
Oh, that's great. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. I was like, if that story ended with, and he also hates that.
I don't know that Pike
so
is his
sad.
favorite captain, but he loves the first season.
Good. Awesome. Right. And as we know, with every Star Trek that has ever happened ever, the first season is a rough sell, man. It always starts bad. It takes time for a new crew to work together because, let's be honest, the show is all about relationships, right? So like everything is about sort of getting to know each other, knowing your character and expressing that character. Also, it just takes some time to start respecting the subject material. This is actually a big thing that I think about often. I think it's weird to walk on the set of this hokey, sci-fi universe and spout technobabble and feel good about it. I think it just takes some time for the actors and the writers to respect
Robert
the material. Okay, I'm gonna give credit to a couple of people. Robert Picardo was easily one of them. That guy hit the ground running. He was amazing. I'm also gonna throw a curveball here. Dr. Phlox.
Oh,
Dr.
yes.
Phlox was great out of the gate, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
That guy never changed. He was the same character by the end of the show as he was at the beginning, and it was perfect. It was just
totally
just tonal perfect. I'm glad we agree because I think Enterprise doesn't always get the credit that it. Well, I'll say it is not always thought of first when saying good things about Star Trek.
That's a fair assessment.
Yeah, so this is a fair one. I think that we can all agree on. Phlox ruled, man. He was actually awesome.
Phlox was great from the get-go. I mean, it's so hard with Enterprise because they didn't get to finish the usual 7 seasons.
Yeah.
And it was getting that last season really was picking up, and I am always wondering what it would have been like, what those last 2 seasons would have been like if they had been given that chance.
And let's draw a comparison, right? How about Voyager? Most people would say that there is a clear delineation between the first 3 seasons and the last 4 seasons of the show. There's this moment where in season 4 things really pick up. Now, not to say that the show was bad beforehand. Certainly, Enterprise had a much rougher first 3 seasons, but it really was very clear that it is possible to come in at the fourth season slump and hit like some fireworks, man, that have the show just go crazy, right? So you could think, I liked seasons 1 through 3 of Voyager. Some people don't, some people do. But I think everyone agrees that once season 4 happens, a new character, a new plot line, a new whatever, and the show goes nuts. The difference between the first 3 and the last 4 are insane. The same could be said for Deep Space Nine.
I was going to wonder if you had that opinion or not.
I'm always the devil's advocate, and I would say that some people would think so more than others. I'll give that. But again, just like Voyager, I think it's hard to argue with the fact that the show ramps up. You can love what was before, but Michael Dorn coming on the show and that really catapulting, like that was the turn of the Dominion War, right? The Dominion War started at the same time as Michael Dorn shows up, and the show is cooking all the way from the instant that starts to the instant it ends.
Yeah,
and
I mean, I would say DS9's delineation, or like the boundary or the barrier between the two, is less extreme than
I agree.
Voyager's.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. But I think that it also showcases the fact that if Enterprise might have been given that chance, right? Because we saw a glimmer.
They should have just put Michael Dorn on Enterprise in season 4.
Listen, man, if anybody could have saved the show, I'm a big Dorn fan. I love that guy. He's as Deanna calls him, Dorny.
This is an extreme tangent, and I'll just keep it to my 2 sentences. But what I was like rewatching DS9 today and thinking about John Delancey's like 1 appearance on DS9, multiple appearances on Voyager. I wish that they'd had him as just a random character that gave Archer some meaningful advice. And he could have been Q without ever announcing himself as such. And I just wish they'd had that cameo in Enterprise. Because of the one episode in Voyager where they talk about how the other Q had like helped out like Riker's ancestor and
Sir Isaac Newton and all sorts of stuff. The guy who saved Woodstock.
Yeah, like I wish that Q had just made a random appearance on Enterprise.
You're right. That actually would have been awesome. I actually recently watched an interview with Delancey where they were talking about how many different series of Star Trek he's been on, because I think he holds the record. He was on TNG, obviously, DS9, Voyager, and then was in Picard, and was also in Lower Decks. So he's been in like
the Lower Decks appearance.
Yeah, man, which is fabulous. I just absolutely love it. Lower Decks is killing it. I love that show so much. I can't wait for it to come back. But yeah, he's been on so many, and that character, I recently discovered that it's not the same for everyone. Like, how we all love that man so much, right?
Yeah.
But there are people out there that hate Q, like with a passion, which is really sad to me that that's true. Anyway, these are tangents. I want to get back to the thing. When we first came into the first episode of season 3 of Star Trek Picard, you can't start this discussion without some major feels that these guys decided to pull out all the stops. It's very clear that they know that seasons 1 and seasons 2 may be a little polarizing, right? Some people really like, some people really don't. You gotta know that they know that that's true. Most of the diehard Trekkies that have been seeing these guys at conventions for 30 plus years, all of those guys, like the old school fans, those are the ones that we more represent, right? It's the newer fans. We have some friends we got into Star Trek recently that are like, Discovery and Picard are the best. And then they have like a hard time getting into TNG, and you're like, let's pull my hair out. But like the people who we represent are those old school fans. So you got to know that those guys that have been seeing them every year at the conventions are not showing up all smiles, right? Like there's a lot of people that they must have seen the mixed response, and you got to know how they feel about that. But these guys, it seems so clear to me that they're going for a brand new start here. They've written off seasons 1 and seasons 2 for the most part, right? There's some throwbacks, and we'll get into that, but it's a brand new start. And I don't even know where to begin with that, because one of my biggest criticisms about season 2 with Picard was like they just threw season 1 out the window. Like it was like a whole new show for the second season.
Yeah.
And that was a problem. Here, it's a good thing, but it's really clear that they're going for like a brand new miniseries.
Well,
it really is better. It would have been better if they really didn't do seasons 1 and seasons 2 and decided we're going to do one really expensive season, which was this season 3, like the whole story of this. Because when you walk in the door, they don't call it Star Trek Picard season 3. It just flashes up as Star Trek Picard. It is a brand new intro. The music, you guys.
Yeah, they have made brilliant music decisions. And yes, the title screen with the starry background, very good.
Yes, exactly. They are very clearly being like, guys, let's kick this off brand new. This is going to be the nostalgia ride that you all wanted to begin with. Let's kick this off right. And it's the music hits you, the old school TNG intro graphics hit you. LCARS has been redesigned to look more like the TNG vibe, which is factual. They really looked, went through that again. And they brought back all these characters. It hits you right away. This is not just the next season in this tumultuous show. This is going to be something new. Did you guys feel like that was true?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. I'm just hoping Chief Jennifer would jump in there.
Chief Jennifer.
I think so.
Well, tell us about it. What do you think? Azure.
Okay. Yeah, without the cameras, it's harder to tell because I always assumed Junie's trying to speak up and I'm talking over her. I mean, I think, I can't remember the exact phrase you used, but I totally agree with it, where I worry that my judgment of these episodes is massively skewed by the awesome nostalgia vibes I get from the intro, the new intro, the outro music during the final credits of every show. It could be a complete mess during the episode, and as soon as we hit that music, my heart just like opens up, and I love that part, like experiencing
the feels. Yes,
and I worry that they're using
every
that.
Episode.
I worry that they're using that to like reverse influence me to like think more fondly about whatever I just watched.
I mean, they might be, and yet still, I'm here for it. Is that weird?
No, I agree.
It helps. It's like, it's the sugar that helps the medicine go down, man, on some of the, so like episode 1, right? This is what we're sort of talking about. Episode 1 was a little back and forth, right? Like it started a little rocky. I was there for some of the plot. There was some stuff that I wasn't super excited about, and then and it was all those little bits about the music and the graphics and all that stuff that really drove that home for me. So I think like it kept me sort of inspired, and that's what I want. Clearly they know what I want. I think that's the real feeling. I think it's that for the first time, I feel like the showrunners know who the audience is. They know who I am on the other side of the screen and what I might like to see. And that, you know, instead of reinventing the wheel and doing something completely new and weird that the newest writer or artist wants to, director, producer, whatever, wants to showcase, they at least are giving some real thought and respect to the original source material, right? It feels good to, I think, be recognized in that way.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think they're so worried about coming across as like fan service, but I think they were so far away from anything that was Star Trek to the majority of their viewers that they had to start turning around and going back to some of those more familiar elements.
Well,
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
I want to defend. I think it's right to be worried about being seen as just fan service. I think that was a valid concern if that's what they had. But one, Chief Jennifer, completely correct. They way overcompensated in the opposite direction at first.
Yep.
But
So far.
I think the references and stuff they're adding here is the perfect level. Like, if you've never heard the opera that Worf was listening to before, or if you've never heard the outro music before, it's still good music. But if you get it, it just adds that extra nostalgia without being a major impact where it's like roll your eyes level fan service.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree with that. But that's what Star Trek is all about and has always been. There is a fine line, and you're right? There is a fine line with like how much do we cater to people who've already seen everything, right? Like how much do we do that? But because we always want new fans, that's the nature of what this is. I totally get it. And not only do they want it, I want it. I want new fans, right? I want a next generation of fans to get into Star Trek. I have said it before on this podcast, and I'll say it again. I think Star Trek makes better people. I know it's a weird and really potent statement to make, but I truly believe it's true. I am 100% on board with them trying to get new fans. But one of the things that really makes Star Trek the biggest and best franchise universe around, right, and I think there's only a couple of other things that can even boast close to this, maybe Star Wars being one of them, is the complexity and involvement of the persistent universe. Every additional show gets more and more challenging to make because it is placed in a really big, incredibly detailed, nuanced universe with fans that know all of it. We understand the technobabble. You know what I mean? We understand the technobabble. It is made up science, and yet we're experts on it. We know the interplanetary politics. You know, we know the races, the species, the ships, the languages. We know all of this stuff, and that's what's always been so rewarding as a Star Trek fan is the more you know about it, the more there is to appreciate. So it has always been like this fine line where we don't want people to feel like it's too intimidating to get into, which Star Trek does strike a chord with, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we want those moments where we stop and go, oh, that's a throwback to episode 13 of season 2 of the show that was made 30 years ago. You know what I mean? Like we just love that stuff. And you see that in Lower Decks a ton because they're freaking beautiful guys. No one from that show is ever going to see this podcast. I hope so someday. But honestly, knocking it out of the park. Like you can't imagine a better balance there. It's comedic, it's hilarious, it's awesome, and there are these inside jokes for people who know the stuff. When Azure and I watched this most recent episode of Picard, and we heard the opera music playing, I was like, no one but Azure and I are going to recognize this. And I started to type it. And Azure's like, yes! I was like, dude, that's what this is all about, man. I love that.
I do want to share just one other thing. You don't want to overdo the references to like exclude people, but you can clearly do it like they're doing here. And also Strange New Worlds did it great. I've never seen the original series, and the finale to Strange New Worlds was still very, very good without me getting any of the references being made. Oh,
that is a great example, Azure. That is a great example because it held up on its own with the same stilts that were holding up the original episode to begin with, right? So like the plot elements were there, like that story was there, the characters were there. It was the same story, but told in an even more three-dimensional, complex way that is more modern. We got to look at it knowing that it was a reference, right? We all knew that it was a reference, even if you hadn't seen the original source material.
Yeah.
And then all that did was exactly what you wanted to do. It inspired you to go and watch the other one too, and then gave you depth that you got to appreciate in addition to that. Now, you don't need that to appreciate the episode, but if you are so inclined, it gave you an entirely new experience having seen the source material.
Mm-hmm.
Another great example of that is Trials and Tribulations in Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm.
You can watch that as a standalone. You do not need to watch the previous episode.
Yeah, the first time I saw it, I had not seen that episode of the original series. I now have.
Same.
But
the same is true for me as well. And I got to go back, see the other one, really enjoy it, and then that has since amplified the amount of fun I have watching Trials and Tribulations. I mean, it's sort of like feeds on itself, and that's what I love about Star Trek in general. I feel like it just always does feed on itself.
Well, right. And there's no, it can be done well. There's no reason why you can't have a reference as long as it's a well-developed plot line in a new episode. Then there's nothing wrong with having a reference to the past. Obviously, if it's done poorly and it's just about the reference and you're totally relying on somebody just being excited that you mentioned some favorite character of theirs, it's going to fall flat. But that doesn't have to be like a one or the other. It can be a reference as long as the plot is well developed, the characters are good. And I think Strange New Worlds really captured that with having references, but being a completely perfectly acceptable plot on its own.
I agree. And I think that it really has to be there, especially for this show. So everything I just said was about Star Trek in general, and everything you said, Junie, totally makes sense. But I think for Picard in general, or in specific, I should say, right, when we did Disco, that was a brand new reinvention of the franchise. It had been, 12, 15 years, something like that, between the last show and this one. It was a reinvention of it, even though it was a prequel, which drove everyone crazy because that really makes it a little tough for everybody in this arena when you're trying to reinvent, because that was an initial step to sort of alienate previous fans, right? Because it was us who were going to like poke holes in what we were seeing. So I wish that they would have just gone fully in the future, right? Something totally new. You could have redone everything you wanted to do. And then that was sort of like a weird take on it. And then Strange New Worlds, okay, connected to the original series, right? Far enough ago, and the original series is dated enough and almost retconned enough, at least a little bit, that we feel like we have a little bit more wiggle room in there, and that's okay. And we really didn't get to see anything about that era specifically and about Pike in particular. So we have some wiggle room there. But this show is literally called Star Trek Picard with the same actors and the same, setting, the same story. There has to be a direct nostalgic connection. There has to be. That is the entirety of the point of it. You could argue that Disco and even Strange New Worlds to a point could be a reinvention that maybe can be a little light on the nostalgia. But any bit of nostalgia I'm seeing here is just a win for me, because especially because we have those other shows that maybe don't have to follow those rules. So what one of my favorite things is, and I want to sort of move into what I thought was good or bad about the first episode. Somebody that I talked to, it could have been Damon, was sort of teasing I think it was Source, actually. Shout out to Source. The sort of, but the old guy buddy comedy between Riker and Picard, right? Like the vibe between those two in the first two episodes in specific. I was so there for that. I love that they're focusing on their relationship, their friendship that really evolved. I want to say it evolved throughout the show, but I really think that it evolved even more like in the movies and sort of implied going forward as they got to be older. Yeah. This sort of like beyond the ranks, beyond the ship friendship that they've got. And this expounding on that, I think it's just been nothing but great fun. I mean, like, I laughed out loud. That was awesome.
Some of the lines from this most recent episode were excellent as well, but I'm sure we'll get to that. Although we do need to keep moving along because we're like 40 minutes in, and I know we can edit
How did that
this,
happen?
but-
Okay, yes.
No, but like, so you were there for Picard Riker sort of like buddy comedy stuff. I agree. I think it was great. Does Jennifer agree, or was that? I know some people started to feel, or sounded like some people felt a little annoyed by it.
Annoyed by the
grumpy old man buddy comedy with the old guys.
I mean, what exactly are they expecting, though? I mean, are they expecting to act the same way they acted 25 years ago and the same relationship they had? Like, you have to imagine what these characters have been through over that time and how they've aged and the kind of relationship they've developed over time.
Yeah, I think it's more about like, and I do agree with you too. I think it's more about like the fact that the writing seemed to lean into the sort of goofy comedy between the two of them, like
laying on the bunks.
The laying on the bunks and the old jokes, right? It's like, your wrists are stiff, my knees ache. As long as I don't have to shoot or run at anything, we'll be just fine. Like, those lines, those one-liners just killed me, dude. I loved it. It was a way for me anyway to sort of acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is these guys are freaking old, man. And that has been like a harsh reality for a lot of Star Trek fans. We haven't seen Picard and Riker together since they were spry, like this has been a hard thing to swallow. And I know Azure and I have had, and Junie, you and I have had great discussions at length about sort of the challenge that has imposed on this show going forward, right? That Stewart is older. His voice isn't as strong. He's lost a lot of that conviction as an orator. It has changed the vibe of the show. That has all felt negative until this season, where it is suddenly kind of fun and funny. That's the difference for me. It put a more positive light on it.
Oh, and so it's also nice to see a little bit of lightheartedness in that as well. It can't. Everything cannot be serious. I mean, we've seen this in Discovery. Everything is serious.
Yes. Yeah, because I mean, the original TNG episodes, there was humor. Not in all of them, obviously, but they had humorous moments.
Oh, but a ton.
DS9 had some really good, funny moments, especially involving Quark.
I
Voyager
love
had
that,
them
man.
with like Tom Paris and Harry's shenanigans,
and the Doctor,
of course. So I think it's fine for them to have moments of this. I don't think they overdid it, although I do know a couple people have that opinion, and that's totally respectable.
Yeah. I even want to say that it's not just necessarily about comedy, because you were saying like TNG had its funny moments, and I think you're right. I think it had like its funny moments, but what it really is more levity. Right? It doesn't have to be funny, but a lot of them were like whimsical moments, right? Just sort of like it put a smile on your face moments. Like it didn't have to be so dark and negative all the time.
Yeah, DS9 did a really good job of breaking up some of the heavier material with those types of episodes or moments as well.
I agree. Yes. And they needed it more than anyone, right? Because that show was dark. Yeah. And even the space station was dark. Like the whole setting was dark. Everything was a little harder. So it rested more on the writing and the characters to sort of bring that feeling that I was talking about at the beginning of this podcast to light, that you want, even though it's dark and creepy and scary and dangerous, you still want to be there. And sometimes that is portrayed with, old guy aching joints on bunk beds. It's just hilarious. All right, so we'll move on. I'm going to talk about something that has been a challenge for me for this entire show. I struggle quite a bit with the Raffi character and the Raffi subplot. So in the first two episodes, even in the third episode, although dramatically helped by the addition of Worf, she is not my favorite line of story here. That has been a tough one. It is clearly going to be an equally important story thread, right? This is like the other 50% of what's going on. Like we have all the action resides with, the main characters and what they're going through, but they don't know what the heck is going on. They have no clue. I think we're going to get what's going on from this other subplot, but it has not always been fun to watch, this whole Raffi thing. This is just me. I'll own it myself. What do you guys think of her? Do you like her? Do you like the character? Do you like the plot that has been unfolding?
I'm making Chief Jennifer go first on this one.
All right. I don't know how to really get into that because I just feel like she is so outside of what I imagine for Star Trek. And I think I've had, and maybe this is just unfair because obviously, like, this is what they've brought into this, but I found a really hard time with all of sort of like the drug references and that side of things. It almost to me feels like they're trying to bring in elements of Star Wars into Star Trek by using kind of her plot.
Mhm.
And now there are parts of it that I'm excited about, what is being implied now in this last the last two episodes with Worf and what we're seeing there. Like, I'm starting to think like, okay, this might have a really interesting tie-in, but I'm not loving the way they're getting to it.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense to me. I think you're absolutely right, Jennifer. I think that it's what Azure was saying at the beginning of the podcast about the characters through which we are seeing this lens through, right? So like these characters probably always existed in the realm of Star Trek. We saw humans that really had it bad or made bad choices or left the Federation or felt badly about Starfleet or whatever it was. We've seen that it is real. We've been really focusing on those characters a lot going forward in this show in particular, and she probably represents the strongest or the most distant version of the perspective that we would like to see, right? Like it's the most potent version of what we're talking about here is her, because she's not even just like some smuggler on the outside of society, not really liking Federation because they're kind of stuffy, right? We see that from some characters like Jack, for example. She was a Starfleet officer and then like made a whole bunch of really bad choices and then is like a drug addict and has done all of these crazy things and has this really negative view of all of this stuff. Like she is the pinnacle of that other perspective that we're seeing a lot here. So it's been tough. What about you, Azure? Maybe you're more optimistic.
I want to be more optimistic. I've been trying to, but I think the potential is there for not only her plotline but her character to turn out to be something I like. So just to walk back a little bit, like, yeah, she lost her position with Starfleet around and because of Picard kind of throwing his hissy fit and resigning rather than trying to influence things from the inside.
Right.
Her life fell apart. She made bad decisions. They kind of started to set her up on like this redemption arc. Like she's mad at Jean-Luc. She's been having these struggles with drug and alcohol and whatever else it was she was doing. But then she joins him and she's kind of doing her best to make good on this stuff. Season 3 opens. We see she's like trying to score some drugs, and I'm like immediately disappointed. Like, okay, they're just going to use her as this example of like things falling apart. And then I get kind of excited when it turns out, oh, she's undercover. She's faking this to get in with the right crowd to help whoever is her handler with Starfleet. All right. Yep. So maybe she's still on this like sort of redemption arc. I can get really excited and I can get behind that. Not to share too many personal details, but as someone who has struggled with addiction, like I like this redemption arc. I think it's potentially cool. I don't like her character though. Like I want to be behind this story. I agree with you. I find some of the monologues that she's given kind of hard to watch or hard to enjoy watching. But I especially I want to root for this type of storyline to come to be like something where like she makes a difference and she like resolves things with her family and like has like a relatively hopeful and happy ending at the end. But I don't know that we're going to get it. And even with how optimistic I am about season 3 overall, given her past interactions through seasons 1 and 2, I don't have high hopes that it'll be the happiest outcome.
I think that actually kind of hit something that might be a lot of how I feel about her character. I can't really trust where they're taking her, and I can't really trust what the outcome is going to be. And with that kind of a character in Star Trek, I want a certain outcome. I wanted to show that things work out well for her and that she does kind of rise above and succeed and overcome her obstacles. And I just don't know if that's going to happen. And I think that kind of unease and mistrust of where they're taking her character is what makes her scenes difficult to watch for me.
Wow,
that's
a really good
fascinating.
point.
Yeah, really good point.
Because I do think the scenes with her and Worf, especially near the end, give me a little bit more hope for her. Like, Worf's a badass, and he can like help her like realize like who she can become, kind of thing, like mentor-mentee type thing. I still don't know that I'll love all those scenes, but we'll see.
I do just want to, since we just brought that up again, we got to talk about Worf being so bloody awesome. His sort of like, okay, so I said it when we watched the second episode, but the unveiling of Worf when he comes in,
So cool.
kills Sneed, right? Whips out a freaking mechleth, which is exactly what you'd want to see. He's not rocking the batleth. He was never that dude. He's chopping up everybody. The guy is old, right? Just like everybody else, but I believe it, man. He is selling it. Like, I feel like Michael Dorn is handling this role so well. He is an older, wiser.
Oh, and the music for his intro.
Still a badass. And yes, the music immediately again, Azure and I freak out because it is the original Klingon music orchestra arrangement. It is the arrangement that you heard in the TOS movies. That's the Klingon TOS movie music, which, by the way, I've been rewatching TNG just randomly. And I watched, it was the Galorndon Core, the episode where it turns out that, there's this Romulan on the ship that they rescue. And then there's Geordi and another Romulan down on the planet in Galorndon Core that are having to rescue each other, despite, the bigotry between the two. And we're experiencing it done well, right? We're experiencing it done in the Starfleet way on the planet. Geordi is helping this other Romulan and ends up changing his mind. Up on the ship, we're getting a mirrored image of this. This is great writing, by the way. We're getting a mirrored image of this same thing between Worf and the dying Romulan he's unwilling to save. More than that, we don't even villainize Worf because the writing was there to back him up because he didn't want to be saved. Remember that the line was like, "I would rather die than pollute my body with Klingon filth." Yeah. And so like, we don't feel bad that Worf won't do it. And Worf does say, if you order me to do it, I'll do it, but he doesn't do it, right? So like, there's this
Riker has a great speech in there too. About like, where does the hate end?
Oh yeah, he gives that whole speech about that with that thing. So like Worf, I don't know, this new while they were doing that, right? In the very end of the scene, when the Romulan is about to die and Worf is like, I'm not gonna help him, they play chords of that like intimidating Klingon music at the end of that. It hit me because I had just heard it from the season 3 Picard episode 2, and I was like, dude, I wouldn't have recognized that, but they like throw those chords in anytime there's like a tough Klingon moment, which I think is really cool. I'll find you the scene and then we'll go over it because I'd like your opinion on it.
Yeah.
But I do it really because I'm watching that version of Worf in the past and this version of Worf in the future, and I just love to see the journey that he's been on. We've seen many iterations of future Worf, and this is probably my favorite one. He's so good. I also didn't you love his intro?
I was waiting for you to bring that up since you had to rewind it to hear it again.
Listen, guys, we do the watch party for the new episode of Star Trek, whatever new Star Trek is on every week in our podcast. Please feel free to come join it. We'll put the link in the comment sections down below.
He meant Discord.
But in Discord. And so when we watched it, I paused it and I made us go back and rewatch it because it was so epic. And there were so many real references there, man. It was so great. How like House of Rozhenko and the whole thing. I don't know. I loved his entire introduction to himself. He was feeling the epicness and delivering on that epicness. And it was just exactly what you'd want.
Yeah. No,
he's the only character that got to introduce himself,
Well, and like the way that he just immediately disarmed Raffi and then gave his introduction.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And you're right. I hadn't thought about it. Like, it's like this sort of like dynamic duo now where she's like the sidekick that's going to be trained and hopefully saved by Worf's evolution of spirit.
Yeah.
He's the evolved, it's not all about hate and whatever. Like, he's clearly offsetting her, problems. It's possible that this is the redemption arc.
Well,
and if
during
that's true,
the watch party, and at the beginning of his intro when he's doing his martial arts, someone in the watch party posted Klingon yoga. But if you remember, he used to teach a martial arts course on the Enterprise that
he did.
Thomas Riker compared to Tai Chi.
Oh my God, you're right. You're absolutely right. It was Thomas Riker that did that.
And I think it's so cool that he is, because like that type of martial arts form is not just about combat prowess. It's about like self-centered meditation and stuff like that. And I love that Worf, like you said, has evolved into like a more balanced, not so angry version of himself. But
which
still
is the only version. But still a complete badass. But also left the Federation, right? And we don't know how he feels about it. But again, we're seeing that same sort of thing. The only thing is that I won't give any complaint against him for that because it was almost preordained, right?
Yeah,
like
it was kind of set up
every
even
version.
at the end of DS9.
Yes, exactly. Every version of well, he was the Federation liaison, right? To Kronos or whatever. But
right,
the
but I think
eventual
the idea was set there that he would eventually like want to return to the Klingons.
Absolutely. And that with Star Trek Online's iteration of the future of the end of TNG, All Good Things, prediction of the future, we have it in our minds that he is a child of two worlds, and I think he eventually finds himself somewhere in between. And that is it's perfectly fine for him.
Well, you got to figure
that.
He's also at the age where, like Geordi LaForge, like Picard, like Riker, he wouldn't really be in active service anymore. So it's not necessarily bad that he's left.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. He'd be retired, whatever he is, right? I think the only way that you stay in Starfleet as a super old guy is if you're Admiral. And do I see Admiral Worf in his future? No, I don't see that. So I think this makes perfect sense. So we can, I want to speed up to the end here, but I want to give a shout out to some of the cool references that I was picking up as we were going through. There's been a ton. They were talking about Deanna and Kestra. This is not the first time we've heard that they named the daughter Kestra, but that is such a throwback to Deanna's sister that died, which I thought was cool. There was a reference in the first episode when Riker and Picard are sitting down over drinks in their first meeting and discussing the plan. They were talking about the Hellbird reference and this whole thing that happened that Crusher had sent this message about in order to decrypt it. Mm-hmm. And they referenced Rigel 7, or he said Rigel 6, and then Picard corrected him for Rigel 7. Rigel 7, by the way, is the planet that Pike had just been traumatized on and lost all those people before the moment before the pilot episode of the original series aired. Junie, if you remember that, it was they end up in the menagerie going back to that planet where he had to fight that big guy and there was the princess in distress. That was Rigel 7. So that's the planet that they went to. And Moon Over Rigel 7 is referenced as a song somewhere because in the backdrop of that original series episode, the moon was like half the screen. Like the moon is so big. Junie's looking at me like I'm crazy.
I'm trying to figure out which episode you're talking about.
The Menagerie, the original series episode.
Oh, I think you threw me off when you were talking about rescuing the princess.
Well, remember, she's the girl who is
that's true.
His mate or his designed mate in the zoo that they're in takes on the role of this like princess in a dress who needs to be rescued by that big barbarian.
That's true. I do remember
that's Rigel 7.
Yeah. Okay.
And that had just happened to Pike before that episode. That's why the doctor at the beginning of the episode offers him a drink, and he's like, "What's wrong, Chris? We gotta talk about this and all this stuff." Anyway, so that's Rigel 7. I thought was kind of cool. They also mentioned that Jack was wanted in a bunch of systems for stealing stuff, incling Binar 3.
I loved the Binar.
Oh, that was a great reference.
The Binar reference was awesome, man. I mean, we haven't seen that since what? That's season 1, I want to say, of TNG. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Some other cool things that I wrote down that I thought were really awesome were Amanda Plummer, the actress who plays the big bad, right, on the enemy ship. Mm-hmm. She's phenomenal and so creepy. I don't know, man. I really always like to tip my hat to female actors who take on intimidating villainous roles and favor their ability to be creepy or villainous over the need to look or feel in some kind of seductress kind of way. You know what I mean? She is genuinely creepy, and I think
so good.
Yeah, it's the way that she speaks too, right? Like something about the cadence in her voice or something. She is genuinely creepy. And if you guys don't recognize her, probably her most famous role, it's an odd role, but she was Honey Bunny from Pulp Fiction.
Oh, you've mentioned that, and I wouldn't have picked up on that without you reminding me.
I went and looked it up myself because I just recognized that face. She's got such a distinct face, but I just think she's absolutely killing it.
The way she says Picard's name every time is also great.
Oh, I know. It is. It's really good. So the other thing was the tractor beam creativity. The creative use of tractor beams in this one has been very interesting. Pushing away, throwing ships at each other,
and the playing response.
Yes, dude, so good. And then also like playing Portal in space. There's a lot of really cool things that they've toyed with that kind of makes you wonder why they didn't do before. Probably money, right? Money, but man, they've been looking great. The space scenes are phenomenal. The ship looks good.
Oh yeah, the space shots are really high quality.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh no, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say one other big shout out. If we're just, I know we're not exactly wrapping up, but if we're doing a quick list, I think we were all a little worried about the reveal from episode 2 and the sort of looks between Picard and Crusher Beverly.
Oh God, yes.
The scenes today were phenomenal.
Oh, yes, the feels, man. I'm so glad you brought that up because that. You know, there are definitely naysayers about this season. There are definitely naysayers about the acting that has been happening, in particular with some of the bigger actors like Stewart. And the interaction in that scene, oh my God, like it was so cool to see it validated with everyone in the watch party because I was not watching the chat. I was not watching Juniper. I was just watching the screen and I was like, oh my God. I was like, that was surprising, honest, and real dialogue. And I looked over at Jennifer, who was crying. She had tears streaming down her face. I was like, that hit hard, didn't it? And she goes, yes. And then I look in chat, and the chat was like, I think I saw 2 OMGs or something. And then I didn't know if that was going to be good or bad. And it was expounded as like people being stunned at the acting in that scene.
Yeah.
Because he hit with a real... Yes, so often I watch these shows and there's these big dialogues between characters and I'm like, that was explained really silly. Or if that was real, he'd be like, you know, what the heck? And say these crazy things. He said real hard-hitting stuff.
And she did too, which was awesome.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because it hit her with a big, heavy pause. Like, she hit him first with, like, this little stuff. And he was like, don't give me that. That is little stuff. This is the biggest decision. You cut me out of the biggest decision of my life. And he does this big thing, hits her hard, and it takes her aback. And I was like, dang, that was really potent. She really got hit. And then she changes tactics and gives a real heartfelt reason of why she did that. And she hits back so hard that it like has him pull back big time. And you're like, dang, this was the realest scene I think I've ever seen in an episode of Star Trek. It was just so...
Yeah, I don't want to spoil any of the specific dialogue in case we somehow have people listening with us to this discussion that haven't already seen the episode, which would be crazy.
Man.
But her motherhood lines were incredible.
That's what I meant. When she changed tactics and hit him with something that just like couldn't be argued with, and it was just so honest and raw and real. Like, you're absolutely right. You walk away going, holy shit, they're both right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They were both right. And that is real writing, man. What were the writers doing this season that they weren't doing the last 2 seasons? Because holy crap, this was a big shift and in a great way. So I'm a huge fan. Giant shout out to that. The last thing that I want to say on the quick wrap up is that I'm literally not hating some of the pass the torch characters. I heard somebody reference maybe the continuation of 7 of 9, right? Which we didn't think about when we thought about the next generation, but she's not that old. Nope. She's not that old.
And she is still phenomenal.
Oh my God, she's crushing it, isn't she? She just has the right energy. She's absolutely killing it.
Even in my notes about the first episode, one of the first notes I made was Jeri Ryan remains amazing.
Oh my God, that woman. I just gave this huge speech to Jenny the other day
because
about
we've been watching Voyager, so we just watched the episode where the doctor goes where the doctor has to go into her physiology because he can't afford to be detected, and the way they were hunting
photonics,
right? The way she plays him was just so excellent. Like that was real incredible acting right there. And I have always loved her character, and I can't say how relieved I am that she is back in Starfleet in this season. So that makes me
more so than ever before, because she technically wasn't in Starfleet on Voyager at all. So she's wearing the uniform. She's Commander Annika Hansen. She could easily captain. Oh my God! Somebody in our chat said that she could captain the
that was me.
Was that you? Okay,
I said if the handoff ends up being to Captain 7 of 9, I would lose my mind.
In a good way, though, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like that would just be the best thing ever. And I
said it after her little friend interaction with LaForge.
Which, by the way, was the next thing I was going to say, was how good Crash LaForge is. I loved her. She's adorable. She's sweet. She's got this relationship and reverence with her father, but like that put expectation on this whole thing. I don't know. I just love her character. I can't wait to see more of it. But I don't want to get off topic for just a second about Body and Soul, because Jeri Ryan deserves all the accolades in the world. That woman is so beautiful that she could have easily rested on a career just based on her looks going into this whole thing. But she ended up getting such a role of adversity on Voyager. She came in where all the pre-existing fans did not want to see her. All of the pre-existing crew did not want to see her. She was replacing a beloved friend on the series. She was a big-breasted, catsuit-wearing blonde chick that was supposed to get people in, and it was viewers in, and it was definitely a studio decision. But she is such an actress. This woman can act, and she can sing, and she is so talented. And what Jenny said a second ago about Body and Soul, the entire episode, she gets the doctor in control of her body, basically, and the entire crux of this episode, the efficacy of the episode as a whole, resides squarely on her ability to invoke the doctor. Like, if that would have been awkward, clumsy, ineffectual in any way, shape, or form, the entire episode would have had to be thrown out, because the entire episode rested on how convincing it was, and it was flawless. If you guys haven't seen it, you go back, please, and watch it. It is an acting masterpiece by this woman. She puts on every affectation of Robert Picardo in this beautiful way. And so this woman can still act so well. And I'm so glad to see she's getting that attention, because she rules, man. Jeri Ryan, awesome. Big fan. So wrapping that up and sort of going into the last thing, the very last thing I want to talk about was the gigantic reveal at the end of episode 3 and what looks to be the unveiling of at least a large portion of the antagonist of this season. Were you guys ready for that? Because, oh my God, it knocked the wind out of me when I saw that.
If you had asked me to make, I don't know, 100 predictions about where this season was going, that would not have been anywhere on my list.
Would not have thought.
In a good way.
The shape, the changelings from Deep Space Nine
and
return.
I mean, how quickly Worf picks up on it, because he has that experience.
Yes. And he gives a throwback to Odo, right? Or at least a nod. He gives a cool nod to Odo. And oh my gosh, how exciting this show became. The best acting I've seen in Star Trek in a long time just hit and landed in this episode. Some of the biggest twists turned around came out of this episode. The shape, like the shape that this is taking in terms of like actual tangible ongoing plot that unfolded finally in this episode changed everything. I am here for this, man. I am going to be sitting there pumped next week for this next episode. And I can't remember the last time I felt that way. I mean, this is great. I think the inclusion of the changelings is going to be This is going to draw us in a way that I think none of us were prepared for. I did not see this coming. Not in a million years.
Nope, me neither.
So there's a lot to be discussed. There's a lot of exciting things to go over. We do have to wrap this up. I know it's been a little longer than we anticipated it to be, but part of that was because we're trying to cover, first of all, the return of the podcast. Second, that there are 3 episodes we were trying to review in this one, podcast of the Night Shift here. So in the future, we will have all the ample time that we want to discuss it. But I'm so glad to be back. I'm so glad you guys are still with me. Chief Jennifer, Science Officer Azure, you guys are the absolute best. This is going to be so much fun to do this journey that we're all on as Star Trek fans. I think this is one of the greatest times ever to be experiencing this. There's highs, there's lows. There's so much to talk about. It's such an exciting time in the world of Star Trek. So I'm very excited to see where this goes. I want you guys who are listening to this to know that we're going to be back. It might be in an audio-only format for a little while, but we're going to be uploading to YouTube and to Spotify, maybe Apple. We're going to look into different things. I will be pinging the Discord whenever a new episode is live and can be listened to. And if you guys are listening to this on one of those platforms and you want to join the community, we would absolutely love to have you. We play Star Trek Online. We're gamers on the side. We do a lot of stuff in our community, and we're really big, passionate Star Trek fans. Anyone is welcome to come join the Discord, hop in and listen, pose questions, interact in the chat while we're doing this. We'd love to have you. So check that link down below on how to join. And I'm so looking forward to next week.
Yeah.
Thank you guys both for coming.
Where I will save my defense of Captain Shaw until next week.
Oh man, Captain Shaw is going to be a whole ass discussion. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah.
Shaw is going to be an evolution over this whole show. I hope. I actually was afraid they killed him this week. Did you guys worry about that?
I'm still a little worried.
Yeah, he looks like he's in bad shape.
Yet. Anyway.
There's a bone sticking out of somewhere, dude. All right, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next week. Night Shift, signing off.